This evening, I'm going to talk about don't tell me. Be grateful to everyone. Actually, be grateful to everyone is a translation of one of Atisha's 7 points of mind training, one of the 59 slogans. Be grateful to everyone. I think it's number 13. One just before that is called drive all blames into one. Which is just what it says, take the blame. So we can talk about that a little bit too, because they kind of go together. But being grateful to everyone it's difficult because we don't want to do that. We want to be grateful to those who are obviously helpful to us. Thank you very much. You've been very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate your help. Thanks. Oh, no problem. Anytime. But being grateful to everyone, that means, okay, it must be in misprint. Can't mean everyone. But it does say everyone. So the idea simply put, the idea is in terms of our practice, in terms of our awareness practice, in terms of the Bodhisattva path or saving all beings or putting others before ourselves and being grateful to everyone. There's lots of ways to look at that. One of the ways is even though someone gives you a hard time, you may not feel particularly grateful, but you could generate a little bit of gratitude because that person, through their activity, is giving you the opportunity to work with your mind in a more challenging way. Work with your mind. They're actually presenting you with the issue that you may be pretty successful at ignoring when you're all by yourself in retreat or at the zoo or driving your car, although that's not a very good place. It's usually a good place to blame people. There's lots of ways of talking about this. You could say people are giving you the opportunity. That's a little comment that you can make to yourself as you work on how can I possibly be grateful to this person or this situation. But it's very powerful in that you can see firsthand as soon as somebody does something to get in your way or obstruct you or hinder you or hold you back or give you a hard time or disrespect you, you right away see your impatience. You right away see your lack of ability to just be with all things, just hold the vow of be with all things, which is also saying save all beings or be with all beings, be with all things, be with your thought patterns. So you could see it, you could say it that way. You could also take it a little bit a different way, and you could say, but this gives you the opportunity to watch and look at. If you're busy blaming, you've got a whole lot of things going on in your mind, emotions and talk and chatter. They shouldn't have, they should, I should, I'm going to do it. If they do that again, I'm going to, whatever. I'm trying not to blame, but damn it all. And so by holding that situation and just observing, just looking through your awareness practice, you're going to be able to be more and more able to just see something as it comes up. Watch the aggression as it comes up. And don't go to war with that. Don't push it down. Don't necessarily enhance it. Don't do anything with it. But if there's some gratitude there, some kind of an attitude of openness, where you want to see more deeply into what's happening there, instead of perhaps blaming someone, you might be so present You just might be. You might be so present that you begin to see the way in which, just use a person as a situation, you might see the way in which that person is suffering, and that their attitude or their action towards you is actually not coming out of seeing you clearly at all. It's just you just happen to be in that particular milieu, and you see that they're coming at you or blaming you or making you at fault because they're suffering so much. So as a bodhisattva or aspiring bodhisattva, this is your opportunity to, the 12th slogan is drive all blames into one. In other words, it's not as Pema Chodron likes to joke, it does not drive all blames into a Spanish person named Juan, drive all blames into Juan. It is drive all blames, but you do it in such a clean and precise way that it's not like, oh, you don't have any chatter around it. Oh, I'll do it. I'll take the blame. What the hell? Blame it on me. No, it's more where it's a very genuine reaching out and saying, that's my, I caused that situation. To the point where you say it in such a way that it's really hard for anybody to really, really hear what you say. They have to take a double take with you. You what? Say, I caused that. And they might even say, you didn't really cause this. No response. No response. You don't have to come around and have an argument with them about how to blame you are. I'm not talking about martyrs. So it's very interesting to us, if we're serious, if we're sincere about this path, to see that when we do get up off the cushion after a few hours of sitting, maybe in the morning, and go into work or go to a place where people are not particularly motivated, but with the high ideals that we have, and they're more likely to operate the way the rest of the world does, is if you see who's to blame, and blame them and hold them and show proof. It's because of, look what they did it. Look what they did. Look what they did. Well, look what you did. Well, look what you didn't clean up. It's just back and forth, back and forth. Watch the news. It's all over. Don't watch the news very long. There's so many ways of looking at that. Be grateful to everyone. It's like the also another kind of a slogan, not Atisha's, but another kind of a slogan in the Zen tradition is, thank you very much, I had no complaints whatsoever. A way of kind of derailing the whole negativity. Have you noticed that there's kind of a basic negativity that seems to rise and want to just argue or fight, and then there's a higher kind of a inspiration to not do that. But yet that lower level negativity keeps saying, no, you shouldn't be treated this way. You should let them know. And then we come up with these little stories like, we can't let them get away with that because they'll just do it again or whatever. They need to be punished. The whole idea of punishment is quite silly if it weren't so sad. So drive all blames into one, be grateful to everyone, take some of the blame, and then be grateful to others for their interaction with you, that they actually help you. They actually help you practice because they present you with your own negativity. When somebody comes at you with negativity, you don't see that negativity, you see your projection onto it that is usually deeply infected with blame. Already, without it, they don't even get a break because you saw them tip over the china cabinet. Does that work? Probably not. I don't know where that came from. Doesn't matter. But when we look at something clearly, if you say something happens there where we kind of derail the whole dualistic argument about it, when we just say, I'll take that, or else we go the other way and say, thank you very much. And do it sincerely, not just, with tongue in cheek. Thank you very much. Ha ha ha. Asshole. It's just the same. We may have to do that a little bit. There may have to be a little bit of that so that we can see how unbalanced that is, to actually take something and actually blame someone else when you cannot see the causes and conditions that arise as any given incident or activity. We can't see them. What we may be able to see through practice, through repetition, one of my favorite words, I like to say it over and over again. Repetition. We might eventually begin to see through the scrim, the warp and woof of our preconceptions, start to see who's actually there. And when we do that, we begin to see the suffering that the Buddha was talking about when he said, life is suffering. He didn't say part-time. We're not talking about pain. We're not talking about necessarily the pain of alternation, which are the first two kinds of suffering. We're talking about the pain of the composite, which is manifesting all the time in just fundamental distress all the time and just being a living being. So we might be able to begin to see through that. And when we see that, we not only see the suffering, but we see that we're not separate from the suffering. You actually are what you're looking at.
What does repetition mean?
Repetition means if you do something over, like in spelling or something, if you keep repeating how you spell something like V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N, V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N. That's going on vacation, aren't you? Yeah. Do you know how to spell vacation?
Not really.
V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N. V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N.
Oh.
Now say it.
V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N.
Let's say it again.
I can't remember.
V-A-C-A-T-I-O-N. But you don't want to get it wrong, because then if you repeat it wrong, then when you go to show people how you know how to spell that, then they blame you. No, it's basically just finding something that you want to learn and just doing it over and over again. It's repetition, to repeat something. Thank you for your question, Ruby Dooby. Questions at this point?
These two, taking it on yourself, taking the blame on yourself, and being thankful,
Grateful to everyone.
grateful to everyone. What is that? Is there a relationship between those and compassion?
Yeah. Because compassion is feeling with, not feeling for. So yeah, that is basically karuna, and that's the bodhisattva path, karuna or compassion or feeling with. It is, yes. You have a question? You didn't. I thought I saw your hand go up.
No.
Oh, darn.
Question.
Mark,
How do I save all beings?
pardon me?
How do I save all beings?
Well, the way you start is you stop meddling with them. So in other words, allow someone to be who they are. When you talk to someone, even though they seem crazy or nuts or confused, allow them to be that way. Just interact with them where they're at. Meet them where they're at. If you meet everyone where they're at, then they save themselves. You don't really have to reach down and pull somebody out of their garbage pit. But you might have to go into the garbage pit and hang out with them for a while. It's the warfare. It's the inherent condemnation or warfare that gets triggered in people all the time. We go in, if you take exception to someone's activity, instead of slowly lightening up on themselves, they start to defend themselves. But if you're just with somebody, and I don't mean going in and necessarily agreeing with them and, doing drugs with them or something like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm saying be with them so that through, nothing is separate. No one is separate. If you begin to understand that, then you'll function in that way. It's called bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. And bodhicitta is the path to Buddhahood, following that path. And when we follow the path, we just meet people where they're at. It's just a fundamental friendliness to others. Take the blame. Be grateful to everyone. Be grateful to the drug addict who shows you what your mind looks like. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sheldon?
So you said be grateful to everyone? Is that what you said?
I did.
So, and to be grateful to someone that's abusing us. I understand that you said be grateful that they're giving us an opportunity to see our own negativity.
You don't want to go too far and make it too idealistic, because then we started getting into martyr stuff. So a little bit, go ahead.
So is that gratitude something other than an action that we take?
What do you mean?
I don't know, is it more of a feeling rather than an action?
What?
Gratitude, being grateful.
I think it could show up lots of ways. How do you interpret it? I'm trying to go deeper into where that question's coming from. I could give you a really definite response, but if you say, is it more like
In a circumstance where someone is being abusive to you or negative to you,
okay?
and you actually get the opportunity to see your own negativity,
Yes.
to be grateful for that. That seems like it's more of a feeling than an action.
Yeah, you might not go into action. You may and you may not. There's different levels of this, and the best level is don't do anything. Don't do anything unless you have to. If you don't do anything unless you have to, which you hear me say quite often, then if you really have to do something, there's a whole lot of things going to have to build up before you lock and load, before you go into any kind of action. It's the good and bad, the right and wrong mentality that is so confusing to us as apparently self-centered beings. It's not that somebody shouldn't be knocked on their butt for something. It's just that it needs to be done out of a fundamental clarity that doesn't abandon anyone. It doesn't abandon the very person you may be giving them a very strong message. It's like I sometimes call that consequences. Like we don't really blame them. Go ahead.
So are you saying that the circumstance where somebody is abusing you and you knock them on their ass, you could still be grateful in that circumstance?
You can, for the opportunity to knock them on their butt.
When you talk about what else did you say? Oh, don't do anything unless you have to.
Yes.
And like specifically, I guess the question is, how do we know when we have to? I mean, is that awareness?
If you don't do anything, if you're you can't really do this as some kind of philosophy, because then it just creates more warfare, and then you start reading books on existentialism, and the next thing you know, you're joining Scientology. It's just a rat race. So I would say, if as a meditator, then this is advice that I would give, or suggestion that I would give to anyone who's a meditator: just don't do anything unless you really have to do it. And of course, you should meditate. But if you don't have to quit your job, don't. If you don't have to get a job, don't. If you don't have to quit a relationship, don't. If you need to do something different than what you're doing, wait. It's basically all I'm really talking about here is patience. All I'm really talking about is patience starts to occur when you have stopped evaluating your situation, and you just are waiting for things to change so you know what the hell to do. It's like you can't get on the bus unless the bus has pulled up to the bus stop. But people are always trying to get on buses and cabs and airplanes and teleportation units and anti-gravity machines that they invent. They think there's some way to do this because they can't stand to be here. So they just start to muscle their way in and force things to happen. You follow me a little bit?
A little bit.
Okay.
However, I'm still almost more confused.
Well,
So,
good.
like, how you start to know you have to, or you just by meditating you're getting ready for the bus or what have you. Is it by awareness through meditating, then you figure out you have to?
You know, it isn't really a figuring out, and it takes some time. I mean, I would say that this may not. I would say, just as a general idea, you probably should sit for an hour a day, and then, and as you go along, just contemplate this. You know, when something comes up where you have an either or, don't buy into that. An either or means you don't have enough information, and that means you want it to happen before it's time for it to happen. It's called impatience. So I would say, wait, hold your seat, you know, either figuratively or actually. Hold your seat and wait and watch the situation, because the weather always changes. The weather's changing constantly. And at some point, I can't guarantee this, but there's a strong likelihood that if you wait, things will shift and shift and shift and shift, and then you'll just see, well, I have to go this way. That's the only way that's open. This other way that I was considering, now that I'm closer to the fork in the road, pardon me, I can see that it's really not a fork. It just looked like one from way back here where I wanted it to happen now. That's what forks in the road are. Just manifestations of ego. Okay, good question. There's a lot more there. Jeff?
In the meditation instructions tonight,
Yeah.
Toward the beginning, sit perfectly still, and
Yes.
then you'll start to see what moves.
Yes.
And then you said, that's the nature of delusion. Something to that, or confusion, nature of confusion.
I said it's the nature of confusion is movement, yes.
So any kind of movement in the mind has
Yeah.
confusion at its root. There can't be anything wholesome that has movement as its root.
I didn't say that. You said that.
Well, would you consider wholesome? Are there any wholesome minds?
Wholesomeness and delusion and confusion are not separate.
Uh-huh.
And if you think they are, there's more confusion. They're not separate. It has to be seen.
Separate,
I wouldn't go too far.
But that doesn't mean they're the same either.
Sure, it certainly does. If they're not separate, then they got to be the same, don't they?
Well, what do you say, when you say separated or something, not separate, but separated or something like that?
The reason I would say that is because it's so easy for us to just bring it down to just cause and effect and simple kind of logic. And it does have its logical aspect to it, but the transcendent part just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Like I was quoting Mark Twain the other day, is a great quote that I don't know if anybody can remember it. That fiction has to make sense. If you write fiction, it's got to make sense. But reality, how's it? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't have to make sense because it's.
Oh, okay.
It's
But
real.
if you were talking about confusion, then you're talking about conventional truth, the relative truth.
So what it is relative truth. So what I was talking about relative truth and the absolute are not separate, but it has to be seen. Don't say too quick. This is what looks like to me. Oh, sure. Whatever you say, boss. One more time. Come on. Ask me again.
Anything that moves in the mind then has confusion as its root.
I said, if you see something moving, that's confusion.
Okay. I'll have to think about it or look at it. I mean, I can't just,
Don't look at it very much.
you know.
It'll be confusing. It's just, Jeff, it's just a way of encouraging people to hold still and watch what continues to move, because generally it's just a lot of stories that aren't really true about this and about that, and I should and I shouldn't. So it's confusing. But we tend to think that, well, this makes sense. We tend to follow it, and we tend to follow that. We tag onto that, and we try to figure out our life. We can't figure this out. Anybody had any luck doing that yet?
If there wasn't any movement, would we be totally beyond life and death, totally beyond any realm of manifestation?
If you looked and you saw no movement at all, this is called delusion.
Because I'm not seeing it. My eyes aren't open. Vision's not clear.
This is great. These are great questions. The issue is, the problem is, the conundrum or the koan is it's not two. So if you try to find one, you create a second. If you try to find this one, you create another second. It's called duality. Anytime you grasp at one thing, you create its opposite. So don't grasp, don't reject. Logically, what you're saying is, if you were talking to a logical person, then you might have a really good coffee shop discussion on it. But it doesn't happen. Do you follow me?
Well, it just seems like, rather than to deal with the question on the relative level, which is, if you're talking about confusion, we're kind of on the relative level. It just seems like you want to just jump to the transcendental, level and, kind of put the question aside that way. That's what it seems like to me.
I'm sure it does.
So you said just now that if you don't see any movement, that's confusion.
The way he stated it.
The way he stated it. And you've also quoted the Karmapa about, at the end of the day, nothing's moving.
Yes.
So how do you resolve those two?
Well, you can't resolve it. That's why it gives ego such a headache. And that's what we're all trying to do, is we're trying to resolve this, unless you're not. And if you're not, the warfare is over. You're not, everything, everywhere you look, you see nothing but the Buddha. And if you see that, what's to agree with or disagree with? In the Shambhala tradition, it's called basic goodness. Everything is basically good. This doesn't mean that someone abusing someone else, or that they're, it's just basically good. We're not talking about a justification for anything. We're saying things, the fundamental nature of things is basically good. And it may manifest different ways, so we would have to deal with it in different ways. And the way Jeff is talking about it is, I can't help but respond the way I'm responding. He's way too difficult to cross swords with. If I start to cross swords with him, we have to leave the Zendo and go out, have a long hash everything all out. But if I'm sitting up here, I don't have to hash out anything. So I do the best I can to teach from the way I see this and the way I understand. I'm not sitting up here trying to be some kind of obscure, confusing or confused Zen guy. I feel sincere that I am sincerely trying to help every person in here, or any person that's watching, as much as I can, to support your awareness, so you will have enough repetition to go into that and go into it, and just repeat the sitting practice, and repeat those slogans: drive all blames into one, or be grateful to everyone. That you could make that, be grateful to everyone. That's really a great slogan to contemplate. I remember when I first heard that a long time ago, decades ago. I remember thinking immediately, why would I do that? It immediately just made no sense at all. So it took me a while to see that it doesn't really make sense as long as we're as long as we have an assumption that we're somebody and we're not at fault, or that we're somebody and then we are at fault, or that there's such a thing as perpetrators and victims. Sure, there are people who do things that are not so good and are painful to others. But the big picture is not being seen. We just look at that and we want to just do something about that. And so it's just a very primitive misunderstanding about the nature of reality. So when I'm taking what Jeff is saying here and just flipping it around, I'm just saying that you can't find a reference point. Sure, you can find a reference point. You can say if it's still, it's still, and if it's moving, it's moving. Well, one thing is delusion and the other thing's not. Can't you do that? Yes, you can make anything fit relative truth. But what is being pointed at is you actually have to step beyond that kind of relative understanding. Question? Yeah. Sent you.
Is it necessary to have a relative understanding?
Actually, it's only necessary to have a relative understanding. If you understand relative truth completely, that is the absolute. They're not separate. But you can't go halfway. You can't say, well, I kind of see this, now I want to find the absolute. You can't abandon the very treasure that's hidden right in front of you. It's right in front of you. All the time. It's hidden in plain sight. Anything else? What's your Dharma name?
Senju,
What's it mean?
hidden treasure.
Further questions? Michael?
So when we have this problem with suffering and the relieving of suffering, and we think we've relieved our own suffering, but then we come into the idea of the rest of the world suffering. Is it that this is a problem because we're trying to find a reference point for all this suffering?
No. What was your name again?
Unyo.
Oh, no. Did you have a question?
Just going back to the be grateful to everyone. Last night when we were studying Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, I think it was in your talk on a question Shoka asked, how is it that other people show us our minds?
The way that was being addressed is that when someone is appearing in front of you, whether they're giving you difficulty or whatever, you are always projecting onto them. You're not seeing other people. You're seeing your idea of other people. One of the best ways to tell that to everybody is, how your mom always talks to who she thinks you are rather than who you are. She always says, "Now, Jimmy." Not necessarily bad, but she may be critical of you. She may be idealizing you, and not, but she's never really. She's always talking about her child as this projection situation. Nothing, not incorrect. There's not something wrong with that. But we do that with everyone. We project onto people. How do I know about that?
How do you know?
Because I do it. So it's not about stopping doing that. It's about seeing that you do. If you see that you do it, you don't have to stop or start anything. I'm not saying meditate your ears away because you don't need to hear anymore. Yes, sir.
the enlightened mind, could it have an image or a thought that did involve movement?
Sure.
Okay.
I knew you were coming back around. I just could see you going way around the corner and coming back down around. Shoka.
Back to your newest question, how do we know if we're seeing our idea of that person?
We always are. You're always seeing it. Take my word for it. For a while. Who's your teacher?
Yeah.
No, so, okay, well, just, my teacher said, so everything I look at, everybody I talk to, I'm seeing my mind.
Is there a progression of understanding?
I think that's a good question. But I don't think there's any kind of a way of, figuring out where those steps are and if it's an actual step or if you go down a little ramp and then go in a little tunnel and then come out, oh yeah, now I have this level of understanding. I don't think there's any way of, Buddhism tries to do it all the time. There's the progressive stages, meditation on emptiness, there's the 10 bhumis, excuse me, there's the five paths and the six paramitas, 6, the 7, the 8, and I'm just trying to figure out how this looks as a progression. So there's some of that happening, but it doesn't really hold up as a protocol. This is the way you will become realizer. This is the way you will work through your particular karma and awaken to no separation, or everything's dependently arisen, which is the basic discovery of the Buddha. Contemplate that. Everything, your thoughts, if I say a rainbow over Philadelphia, do you see that? Well, there's no way you can see that. There's no rainbow there, and you can't see Philadelphia. But you see something, you see some, so that is dependent upon my voice saying that. And that dependency is, I don't know where that's, but there's some kind of a trail somewhere that is producing that image. I didn't say it because it makes any sense. It just showed up. I said, well, I didn't say anything. I just looked back there and that's what I saw. And if I look back there very much, it'll, I'm just full of ideas like that. And they don't make any sense, particularly. More?
Maybe.
Question from Ash, who's back in New Haven, Connecticut.
Yeah. Hello, Ash.
She said, I'm watching the live stream now. Here's your question. The suffering and confusion that people operate of is so much more intense now that I'm in the mundane world, post Sokakoji. So how can I participate in the mundane without feeling like I'm one of them?
You are one of them. If I'm one of them, then you're probably one of them too. So you are. Just practice a lot, do a lot of awareness practice, hold your seat, and as you've heard me say, follow that the 90-10 rule. Talk 10% of the time, listen the other 90. Beyond that, there's not too much you have to practice. You don't really have to go out and save anybody. That right there will keep you from meddling with people quite a bit. Well, it's difficult, and there is quite a contrast from being in this environment and being in an everyday society, culture. Very speedy out there. Further questions? We have some time. Sheldon?
In the past, you've talked about meditation being just ordinary.
Yes.
I think you've said that before.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be a pretty strong contrast between what's occurring during meditation and what's occurring off the cushion.
Yes.
Not meditating. So it makes it kind of hard to understand what makes it just ordinary.
That's a statement. Do you have a question?
What makes it just ordinary?
It's ordinariness.
If it's just ordinariness, why does it seem different than what's occurring off the cushion?
It doesn't if you sit a lot. Sit more. Sit a lot. This, when people start, I don't often tell people how much they're going to have to sit. It's a lot. You have to sit a lot. That's why there's 6.5 hours of scheduled sitting meditation here every day except for Sunday. A lot of sitting. It just takes a lot. Actually, if I had this temple monastery were full of monks, when I say full, I'm saying we had a dozen people or something like that, I probably would, and they didn't have jobs, I'd probably ramp it up. It seems to be very, very necessary to hold still and watch the confusion. Because if the body is moving even slightly, because the body and mind are not separated somewhat, or had the illusion of being separate, but because they're not separate, the only way you can see that movement and see how that movement is fishy, just to hold very still, which allows that movement to have more contrast. Body's very still. You're just watching, and you can see how, if you do it enough, eventually that flattens out, and that's ordinary. Nothing lasts. People sometimes sit for a while and say, "Oh, I had such a great meditation." Like I give a shit. I know it sounds sarcastic, but it's like, keep sitting, keep sitting. We're not trying to get a great meditation. Everybody has great meditations the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks or 3 months they meditate. But if you meditate a lot over and over, those don't hang around very much. They go away, and then you start to sink that below the radar of ego down into the very stew that you need to look at. Yes. And
Are you saying that my perception of ordinariness off the cushion is going to change if I sit a lot?
everything changes, and especially perception, until it doesn't. And when it stops doing that, there's no longer anything to perceive, because everywhere you look, you see yourself. It's called Buddha nature, and it's nothing special. It's just that there isn't anything left to do. Unless people come and say, I'm not feeling so good. What do you think I should do? I think you should meditate. How do I do that? Sit down, hold still, and watch what moves. Is that delusion? Maybe, maybe not. I don't. It's not really important what it is. More. Good questions. Thank you, sir.
So it's not important that it's chaos or confusion?
What is the question? Ask me a question rather than.
I did. It's not important. So it's not important that it's chaos.
So it would be better if you say it's not important that it's chaos. Go up at the end of the sentence. It's more like a question. It's not important that it's chaos. I'm teasing you a little bit, but I want you to be precise. I cannot give you a precise answer unless I have a really, really shockingly precise question. You give me one of those now, you'll knock me off my seat. Not really.
So the universe.
Universe. Okay, go ahead. The universe.
Where you said the lack of motion is the absence of confusion.
I said that?
Or no motion is the absence of confusion. I may be paraphrasing.
No motion. No motion.
Motion.
I'm getting confused now. What? What's the question? Let's just make it a simple, no preamble, no preface, no introduction.
Is motion confusion?
Yes.
Is there ever a state of no motion?
Yes, but it's not a state.
What is it?
It's reality. Uh-oh.
I mean, just another way of coming at it. Isn't that what Dogen was talking about when he was sort of, I mean, this is the stuff I don't understand when I read him, but like time's unreal,
Yeah.
you know, and movement and all that. is
Yeah,
unreal.
you're talking about being time. Dogen's treatise on being time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I guess. I didn't talk to the dude, but
Kind of getting at the same things.
it's the things are not what they're cracked up to be. It looks this way. We work this way, and we try to make our life work based on control, no control.
But that makes perfect sense because movement equals time.
I was right all along. Thank you. That was good. That was tying that into Dogen's work is good. Dogen is difficult to understand relatively, but is very, very accessible if you give yourself some room and allow yourself to. It's more like smelling flowers. To listen to Dogen. Yes.
So but is not motion enlightenment?
No. Your posture's going.
Well,
I could do that.
yeah, but
Yeah, but
we're talking about two polar things, motion and non-motion.
okay. If you're not careful, I'm going to have Chazon answer your question. Then you're really going to have something to deal with.
Well,
Go ahead. Give me a succinct question. What does succinct mean? Crisp. Give me a very toast-like question. Zweiback. Yeah.
Well, since they are a duality that we've established, motion and non-motion,
Yes.
is it neither true?
Very good. They're both true and not true. That's Nagarjuna. Is things are both in motion, not in motion, both and
Both true or neither true?
Yeah. Yeah. Nagarjuna's Tetralama fourfold negation. Not this, not that, but not both, not neither. So the basic thing that comes down to is you can't really get a relative reference point on this, but what you can get is you can get the understanding that you could actually get beyond. When I say beyond, that you could see this suffering and see this tension so clearly that you could begin to move beyond it. And one of the ways we do that is to function with what's called relative bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta is drive all blames into Juan Carlos. Drive all blames into Juan. And be grateful to everyone. It's really a practice. I mean, it's a very down and dirty. Like somebody is doing something and whatever they're doing, it's irritating you, and you don't necessarily have to tell them, but you take that, you say, this is my projection that's doing this. This is my mind that is showing up as this person. Be grateful this person is bringing you their mind and your mind at the same time. So you could have some gratitude. If you're on this path and you're sincere, then gratitude has to go in every direction. Everyone has been your mother. A few of us have had not all that comfortable relationship with our mothers, so I can think of several of us right now. Me being one of them. On the other hand, our mother, for whatever it maybe, did care for us or love us, maybe she didn't have the skill to maybe express that so well. Question?
From Chuck.
Yes, Chuck.
What is the motion then?
What is the motion? That's the deception. That's the motion is I like it, I don't like it, it should be, it shouldn't be, maybe it should be, should I do this or shouldn't I do that? Well, if I shouldn't do that, then what's going to happen? What are the consequences of doing it? So it's motion. Mind is doing it all the time. And when you begin to see that, you also realize that you cannot stop it. When I say to people, don't add, I know you can't stop adding. I can't stop adding. I'm thinking up stuff all the time. What's the difference?
You don't believe there's somebody that's.
I neither believe what is arising, nor do I disbelieve it. It's a very important point. It isn't like, oh, I don't believe anything. You have to actually accommodate the entire enchilada. You have to see that it's believing or disbelieving is taking a reference point or assuming some kind, but you can actually not have a position on it, which doesn't feel very good to self-centeredness or ego. We want to know, is this right or wrong? Should I believe it or not believe it? Do you believe that? What do Buddhists believe? I say, not much. I don't say nothing. I'm not a fool. Walk into some existential guillotine. But not much. I mean, a little. So it's middle way. Some things are kind of we take for granted or believe, which is what believing is, taking for granted. But then other things we're not taking a position on some of those things. I don't know how well I did, Chuck.
No follow-up. Yeah.
Anything else, Chuck? He's sitting up there in the Twin Cities, scowling at me. Yes, sir.
So anytime we create a reference point where we begin to believe one of our concepts, you said then we are creating its opposite?
Anytime you grab this as being it, you create the other pole. Just the nature of the way things are hooked up. Relative truth does that. Life and death, night and day. The planets work that way. The sun and the moon. Everything has its kind of polarity happening back and forth, back and forth.
All right, this grasping at this concept,
Yeah, okay.
is that where the delusion or the perceptions are tainted?
What do you mean by tainted?
They begin to become more desire or pushing away or ignoring.
Okay. Yes. Anybody else?
Chuck has a follow-up.
Yes, Chuck.
He says, so we are watching what?
So we are watching thoughts moving and coming and going. Just like the image I quite often use is like clouds or like fish in a pond. We're just watching them, and as we practice, we have less and less of some kind of personal identification with the rightness or wrongness, or the fish going the right way or the wrong way, or large or small or blue or red or whatever. Same thing with the thoughts. We're able to actually have negative feelings and emotions go through and be seen as thoughts, and have positive feelings and emotions and go through and be seen as just as thoughts. They do not support a self. There's no self behind those thoughts that is thinking those thoughts. It's even been said, I think it was a Stephen Batchelor, a thinker without thoughts. Maybe it was his wife, I don't know. Somebody said, maybe even wrote a book on that recently. It's like that. It's a way of talking about it. It's like thoughts without a thinker.
That might be John Kabat-Zinn that did that.
He did? He's such a rascal. Yes.
Is everything that arises movement?
Well, just the nature of something arising is moving, falls away, and it moves and it falls away.
So everything that occurs while we're meditating is movement.
Anytime. I'm moving my hands to talk. I'm flapping my tongue as usual.
So everything that occurs while we're meditating is confusion.
Everything that arises is relative truth. So from the point of view of awakening, our attachment to it is the problem. It's the attachment to it that magnifies that sense of warfare and this sense of desire and want and aversion. Want this and have aversion for that. We just get so caught in that stage play. We think it's real. It's unreal. One of the ways you can see that it's unreal is just what happened 2 weeks ago Thursday. Can't remember. We have this intense day where things are going on, and unless you keep a diary, you won't be able to remember any of that stuff. We have some kind of illusion of there being this past where all kinds of things happen and a future where all things are going to happen. Very fishy. Just this. I mean, I'm not negating what sitting down in the community room a little while ago and eating. What do we have?
Potatoes.
Yeah, that. And what else do we have? Banana splits. Yeah.
Salad.
Great salad. Oh, salad. Yeah. Yeah, but no banana splits. No. So it's time is moving. It's an illusion, of course. Read Dogen. You know, he does a much better job. I can't explain this stuff. I'm baffled. I dedicate the merit.
We do have our Donna boxes outside, one outside the teacher's door and the other right outside in the hallway for the temple.
There was a cherry in the bottom of that.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jio San Chi Shi Son Ru Sa Mo Sa Mo Ko Ja The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita,